For most music producers, the DAW is by far the most important music production tool that they use. It's a do-everything tool that they can use to write, compose, produce, mix, and master all at once. And having that level of utility in one tool is truly irreplaceable. Most producers will pick one DAW in particular that they really like Ableton or Logic or FL Studio, and they'll get very good at it and do a bulk of their work right in that DAW. So why would anybody want to include a hardware sampler in their music production process? Well, I think there are a few really good reasons to include a sampler in your music production process, but just to be clear, modern DAWs are so good that they basically include every single tool that every single sampler can actually do. That said, there's still so much value to be had from using a hardware sampler. And the first reason you might want to include a hardware sampler in your music production is for hardware sampling techniques. Throughout the process of learning how to use hardware samplers, I've learned a lot of interesting techniques that I wouldn't have learned otherwise. And in the past, before DAWs were really popular and widely available, these were really common techniques used on samplers to do all kinds of different things. And a lot of these techniques are still very relevant today and very useful for modern music. For example, one really interesting way that a lot of people will create melodies and chords on a sampler is by recording individual notes into different pads, and then combining those pads together to create really interesting sounds. To demonstrate, I'll go ahead and record my guitar into my SP404, and I'll record a different note on every single pad. And from there, I can create these really cool melodies and chords that sound like this. This technique in particular works really well with instruments that have very unique tonal qualities, like a guitar or a voice. And if you're a good singer, you should definitely try doing this because it sounds amazing. And it's techniques like this that you can do in a DAW, but I know for me personally, I never would have thought of doing something like this just sitting at my computer. It's really been the process of learning how to use a sampler and learning how other people use samplers that's helped me discover techniques like this that I would not have discovered otherwise simply just by using a DAW. And the second reason you might want to try using a sampler is for creative resampling. I find that having a sampler right there in front of me with all kinds of different knobs and buttons that do different things allows me to explore sounds in a much different way than a DAW. For example, I'll go ahead and load in this sample that I created, and I'll just start messing with it and see what happens. And there were a number of things I did there that I really wouldn't have done in a DAW, and in particular that reverse sounded really good, which you of course can do in a DAW, but it's just not something that I would really think of. But having a sampler right in front of me and having that reverse button right there allows me to just try it out, and if it works, great, and if it doesn't, I just push it again and I move on to the next idea. And the same goes for all the other pads and knobs on a sampler too, where you can use a MIDI controller in a DAW and hook up different pads and knobs to different functions within the DAW, but that takes a bit of work and thought, whereas with a sampler, I can just kind of explore and not have to think too much. Because of this, even when I'm not producing a track on a sampler, I still kind of like to start out on a sampler just to be able to explore different ideas. And a lot of those sound manipulation techniques have become part of my music production process that I can apply to DAWs now too. And a third reason you might want to include a sampler in your music production is integration with a DAW. A lot of modern samplers have really great connectivity with your computer. For example, on my SP404, I can use this USB-C slot right in the back and plug it right into my computer. And then from there, I can go into Logic and connect the input and output directly to the SP404 really easily. And from there, I can start sending audio back and forth between the DAW and the SP404 and do some really fun, interesting things. The SP404 in particular has really great effects, so it makes a really great little effects box for your DAW. But I can also easily record some sounds from my DAW onto my sampler and start messing with them there. And then once I find something cool on the sampler, I can start recording that back into the DAW. It's really amazing the possibilities that having this basic connection between the DAW and the sampler opens up. So for me, hardware samplers have become a really integral part of my music production process. And that's not to say that I use them with every single song or track that I produce, but I always have one right nearby just in case I want to try something out on it. And a lot of times I'm at least just starting a track out on my sampler because it's really inspiring and it helps me create music that I really wouldn't create otherwise just by using a DAW. So I hope you found that interesting, and I'll catch you next time. Later.